Adoption and God's surprising plan. I want to invite you into a conversation on just that for the next few minutes. I'm Mark Mellinger from the Gospel Coalition, along with Noël and Talitha Piper. Ladies, thank you so much for setting aside the time and joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Talitha, you're obviously adopted, and I'm going to start by talking with your mom a little bit. It's my understanding, Noël, that the idea of adopting was yours. You were the one who originally wanted to do that. Is that so?
Well, we had talked about adopting before we were married, but then we had 4 sons, and then it sort of faded away as an idea for a while.
Okay, and then it came back.
Then it came back, and I was the one who was more interested at that point. We both thought adoption was a great idea, but we were moving into a chapter of life where we wouldn't have as many soccer games and school plays and things, and so sort of thinking towards other kinds of ministry together. So, my husband probably thought we might be too old for that. But
about how old were you at the time?
I was 47 when Talitha came to us, and he turned 50 the month after. But it seemed normal to me. My mother bore her last child when she was 47, so
no big deal.
Yeah.
You get a 2-month-old baby,
That's right.
No big deal when you're 47. Oh, okay. So what was the motivation for you and John, and why did you want to adopt at the time?
We'd been doing a lot of pro-life things. This was in the first half of the 90s, and marching in front of abortion clinics and praying and rallies on the Roe v. Wade Day. And I just had a growing desire to do something in addition to what used my time like that involved more of my life. And at the same time, we were realizing that it was hard to find adoptive homes for African American children, and so those two things came together to make the desire rise in me.
And Talitha, this is the home that God has ordained for you to grow up in, and now here you are, ready to go off to college. You were telling me before we went on camera that you're going to be matriculating at Boyce College down in Louisville, so congratulations. Has it ever mattered to you that you were adopted? What has that meant to you?
It's meant different things growing up. Definitely when I was little, I just thought it was kind of a cool thing, and that my parents chose me and didn't even know anything about me, but chose me to be in their family. And then as time went on, it just got to be more spiritual, and just seeing how the parallel about how God chose us to be in his family. And so it just meant more and more as I've grown up.
What are the greatest challenges and greatest joys of being an adopted child in your case?
The greatest challenges would probably be just I don't look like my parents, and so a lot of times people don't guess that they are my parents. But definitely greatest joy is just kind of to be folded into a family and to feel that, and because I wasn't born into this family, and so I didn't just have that beginning feeling, but then just to feel it more and more as I've grown up, and just to connect with my brothers on different and deeper levels as I've grown up, and so it's been a joy.
Your experience as an adoptive parent, how has it been different than you might have predicted 20 years ago almost?
Well, one big difference doesn't have anything to do with adoption. It has to do with having 4 sons and now having a daughter.
Yeah, right.
And daughters
Yeah.
do things differently than boys do, so that was a learning thing. But there are other things that I had just assumed that having an adoptive child, that was just a different way that a child comes to you. And I hadn't realized the impact, which actually I have to say honestly, I've seen more in other families than in our own, but the impact that you really are bringing another family's history into your home. And so it's just not quite as straightforward as this child. We'll just treat this child the same as we have all of our others, or things will be the same. Because then you realize, even with the children that are born to you, things are not all the same from one to the other. So there was a lot to learn about things like that. But also, and probably more important, adoption is a picture, like new birth is, of God bringing us into his family, just 2 different images. Mm-hmm. And I think it's easy to understand the big concept of being taken from not being God's child and being adopted so that now we are, but living with it, there are implications and details that just became a lot more real, and therefore gave more insight into who God is and what's happening when he adopts us.
that's a rich reward of
Yes,
adoption right there
yes,
that not everyone
that's right.
would think of. It wouldn't immediately come to mind. Let me ask you, both of you, do you think we are at a point now where we are seeing a new awareness within the walls of evangelicalism of the importance of adoption and orphan care? I don't care who wants to start.
You want to say
I
something?
I know you pay attention. You blog about all kinds of things, Talitha. What do you think?
I do think it's becoming more and more popular to adopt, and just people are writing more and more books about it and putting up more blogs about it, and I think that's really cool. And it's not just African American adoptions, it's Chinese adoptions and Russian adoptions, and like all over the world. And I just think it's really cool to hear all these stories and to see people step out in faith and go across the world and adopt a child.
Noel, in your experience with this, and you have a lot longer experience in the church, have you seen this idea gaining traction, this concept of adoption, in the last 5 or 10 years in a way you didn't before?
One thing I would say is that even before we adopted, there were a large number of adoptions within our church. So we have a community around us where there's a lot of adoption, and it's a much more normal thing. So that could skew my opinion for good.
Yeah.
But another way to measure would be, at the time we adopted Talitha, it was really hard to find good books about adoption. Certainly it was hard to find books that were written from the perspective of a Christian family adopting, who realized that God is the one who puts a child into a family, whether it's born or adopted in a family. It's not family parents going and looking at all the children and choosing which one. It's God who puts the child in the family. So there's a lot more rich literature and resources out there. So I'd say that's a good sign that there's a lot more awareness. And I really like it that you use the phrase orphan care as well, because realistically, most of the orphans in the world will not be adopted. But the church can do so much, and individuals in the church, to reach out for Christ's sake to children, either in their own community or farther away around the world.
I think that's the point too. Even if you don't adopt, you as a Christian and your family can be involved in this. You can be involved in adoption and orphan care, right? That's the message we want to get out.
Yes.
Okay, let's end it here. I think you would both probably say not necessarily every family is equipped to adopt right now. What are some legitimate factors to consider? And Noel, I'll ask you since you're the parent. When a Christian family is asking and trying to decide whether we should adopt, what are some factors where you'd say, put on the brakes? And what are factors that would lead you to believe, no, it's probably okay right now?
I don't know if I'm going to answer put on the brakes, except as people around a couple say, I'm not sure about this. Other people who are more aware. One of the big things over these last few years, as you asked about differences, is the awareness that even children who are adopted at a very young age can come into a family with emotional challenges. And you know, they've already been taken from their birth mother and then perhaps from foster care where they were getting good care until they came to their adoptive family. Children come different routes, but that has effects that we don't know. You can't go back and say, okay, the child can't go back and say, okay, I remember this and how hard that was. It's just there. So, and then more and more children, thanks a lot, in large part to Christian families, are older when they're adopted, and they bring even more challenges. So the awareness of the things that can be difficult in adoption is really important. Talitha and I have been to a number of adoption-related conferences, and over the last 3 or 4 years, I feel like I'm hearing at those conferences a lot more awareness of the challenges and even the suffering that can come with that, and which some people would use to say that's the reason not to adopt. But I would say if Christians, the ones who are equipped in all other ways the best they can be, if Christians aren't the ones who are willing to move into suffering, to give a child something steady that points them to Christ and gives them somewhere steady in their life, a home, who's going to do that?
Who's going to do
So, yes. So I'd say the awareness is important, and in the same way that someone might choose to go to a difficult mission field, even though it might be dangerous, I'd say it's really good that there are Christian families who are willing to step into this, even though it may be very difficult.
One follow-up, Talitha, as we talk about doing hard things. You wrote a letter to your birth mother, someone you don't even know. You believe and saluted her. You believe she did a hard thing and saluted her for doing it. Tell me a little bit about that and why you felt it was necessary to do that.
I never really thought about my birth mother until about a couple years ago, and on that Mother's Day that I wrote that letter, for some reason I just woke up and had her on my mind the entire time, even though I've never met her, like you said, and I just don't know anything about her really, and I just woke up and had her on my mind as this might be a really, really hard day for her, thinking about putting me up for adoption and did I do the right thing. And so I just wanted to not just affirm her, but affirm just all the birth mothers around the world who have done hard things like that and who might be needing someone to say thank you, and they haven't had that before. And so that was my main thing in writing that letter.
Talitha, Noel, thank you both so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.